The Dungeons & Dragons Open Game License, or OGL, will have widespread ramifications for the D&D industry, but what could it mean for Critical Role? My name is Luna, and let's take a look at some of the ways this could impact our favorite nerdy-ass voice actors. Please bear in mind, I am not a lawyer. This is all speculation. It could change at any time if Wizards of the Coast or Critical Role release a statement. It's chaos. Here is a super duper quick rundown for those of you who are new to this situation. If you are deep in your doom scroll and you already have the basics, you can skip ahead to the next chapter. The Open Game License, or the OGL, is a document that allows third-party creators to make their own content for D&D. It's what allowed Paizo, MCDM, Ghostfire Gaming, and other businesses, including Critical Role, to publish their own D&D content, such as Tal'Dorei Reborn. This OGL was first published in 2000, and it has allowed an explosion of creative contributions to Dungeons & Dragons, from hobbyist writers putting together small PDFs to major publishing houses doing $1 million or more Kickstarters. Now, as reported by Linda Kodega for IO9, Wizards of the Coast is looking to revoke that original open game license, and creators will have to agree to the new license, OGL 1.1, which reportedly has the following stipulations. Businesses that earn over $750K per year will have to pay royalties on their gross income, a royalty of 25%, with Kickstarters having a reduced royalty of 20%. Creators must inform Wizards if they are creating third-party content by registering on a database, and they have to report their income and the products they're making. Wizards can change the terms of the new OGL at any time, provided they give 30 days notice, which in the scheme of things, if you're planning a really big project, 30 days is not a lot of notice to get a whole bunch of new terms. And most concerningly, I think for a lot of people, Wizards can claim ownership over anything that you make under the OGL 1.1, and they can republish it or use it in any way they see fit without credit, consent, or financial compensation. There are lots of other aspects to the leaked OGL, which is like 9,000 words long, but those are the main takeaways that have people concerned. This OGL 1.1 document has been quite widely leaked now, and it's pretty publicly available. So how does this impact Critical Role? Well, an important thing to note is that the OGL 1.1 only covers print and published materials, like books and PDFs. It doesn't cover video or streamed content. That content is covered under the fan content policy. That policy is what allows YouTubers like myself to make D&D content and streamers to stream actual plays. The main caveat to the fan content policy is that the content you're making has to be free for the public to consume. It's likely that any larger companies that have their D&D content behind a paywall, such as Dimension 20, probably have a custom licensing agreement with Wizards of the Coast so that they can do that. Since the Critical Role streams are freely available both on Twitch and YouTube, the streams are not going to be affected by this new OGL. Now, there is every chance that Wizards of the Coast could update that fan content policy at some point, but for now, the streams should be fine. The published books, however, is where things could get a little bit murkier. Critical Role has published 4 books so far. They have the original Tal'Dorei campaign setting book, which was published with Green Ronin, as well as Tal'Dorei Reborn, which was published by their in-house publishing firm, Darrington Press. Both of those books are published underneath the original OGL. They also have Explorer's Guide to Wildemount and Call of the Netherdeep. Both of those books were actually published by Wizards of the Coast. Those 2 books make Exandria official in the D&D canon, and the 2 brands are very intertwined. Because of this intertwinedness, I've seen a lot of comments here in my comments section and on Twitter and in Reddit concerned that Critical Role is going to lose their intellectual property, or Wizards of the Coast is going to be holding over their intellectual property to kind of keep them staying with Dungeons & Dragons. But I want to remind everybody that Critical Role is a big multi-million-dollar company. They are probably lawyered up to the hilt and would have copyright lawyers going over every deal they're making to make sure that they're not giving away any of their intellectual property. If you look closely at the Tal'Dorei Reborn Open Game License section, you can see that it's actually been amended to include an extra section. It reads, "The following items included within this work are hereby identified as the product identity of Critical Role LLC," so that's product and product-like names, logos and identifying marks including trade dress, artifacts, creatures, characters, stories, storylines, plots, thematic elements, dialogue, incidents, language, artwork, symbols, designs, depictions, likenesses, formats, poses, concepts, themes, and graphic. It just goes on. It covers a lot of things. So that extra clause being in a third-party book is pretty standard. Most third-party publishers will put a clause of some kind in their document saying that, anything that is not part of the open game license, the system reference document, is the intellectual property of whoever wrote the thing. But what is really notable, I think, in terms of this copyright stuff is that in the credits section of Explorer's Guide to Wildemount and Call of the Netherdeep, it states, "The world of Exandria, its group of individuals, its elements, its distinctive characters, and its locations are the sole property of Critical Role. All other characters and their distinctive likenesses are properties of Wizards of the Coast. These disclaimers indicate to me, just, a layperson reading it, that Critical Role has retained all of their intellectual property as part of this agreement, and it's likely that Critical Role and Wizards of the Coast have their own custom agreement, wholly separate to the open game license. It would make a lot of sense for Wizards of the Coast to offer a more equitable deal to Critical Role since they hold the love and devotion of so many D&D fans. It's likely that Critical Role, leveraged and negotiated so that they could retain their IP in those deals. Sorry, I missed this whole section while I was filming. Now, if Critical Role is going to publish future third-party books, say they want to publish a book about the continent of Isilra, which is another continent on Exandria, then they may need to comply with those OGL 1.1 terms, or they will need to again come up with another custom arrangement with Wizards of the Coast. Alternatively, they could still publish the setting book and just not include any 5th edition, or sorry, it'll be 1D&D stuff in there. So it will be more like narrative descriptive things, setting things without specific Dungeons & Dragons stat blocks. Now, what other arrangements Critical Role and Wizards have come to are all speculation, but I think it's kind of safe to assume that there are probably NDAs and non-compete clauses and all other kinds of corporate shenaniganry that we are never going to be party to. I've seen a lot of people, especially on Twitter, saying that, Critical Role should come out and make a statement in support of third-party creators. But I think that those people are going to be waiting for quite a while. I like to believe that everyone over at Critical Role is watching this whole situation unfold and sympathizing with third-party creators who don't have the same access to Wizards that they do, but at the end of the day, they are a corporate entity, likely bound by non-disclosure agreements, and legally, they probably can't say a thing. But while they can't say anything publicly, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't see changes at Critical Role in the future. Critical Role said numerous times in the lead up to Campaign 3 that they were going to be shaking things up, that there were going to be some big changes. And I feel like so far in the way events have panned out, we haven't really seen that come to the fore. As we approach a potentially world-breaking event in the game, this could be a chance for Critical Role to make a drastic change, either in the world itself or in the system that they're using. We've already seen them move away from D&D copyrighted names, most notably the gods. Vecna is now the Whispered One, Melora is now the Wild Mother, Sarenrae is now the Everlight. In Legend of Vox Machina, we saw Scanlan cast Scanlan's hand instead of Bigby's hand. So with a world-shaking event, we could see other parts of the setting changing to move away from D&D IP. Since originally Critical Role was a Pathfinder game, I've seen some fans hope and speculate that maybe they might go back to Pathfinder, and I'm really sorry, I think the chances of that happening are quite slim. Because firstly, Paizo, the company that makes Pathfinder, is potentially in hot water themselves because Pathfinder is based on the OGL. And secondly, because if I was a major company concerned with getting tangled up in somebody else's intellectual property and brand and having to pay royalties, the last thing I would want to do is align myself with a different brand or a different company to only have the same thing potentially happen again in a few years' time. What I think would be a more likely scenario is Critical Role publishing their own game system. They already have an in-house publishing firm, Darrington Press. They've already been publishing a few games. If they were to create their own system, then they could use it for the streamed game, and then they could also sell it to their fans, and they wouldn't have to worry about paying royalties to anybody else. Of course, they may lose some audience members who don't want to watch another system, but they could be a big enough company to weather that. Now, is this something we would see in Campaign 3? I don't think so. I think it would be a little odd to change game system partway through the campaign. However, it is possible that they wrap up Campaign 3 by the end of 2023 because this new royalties arrangement with Wizards of the Coast would come in 2024 if that is the applicable deal that Critical Role has. And then they could launch Campaign 4 with their new game system. And I think that could be really exciting. D&D has held a bit of a monopoly over tabletop games for a long time, and they're clearly trying to solidify that position with this OGL 1.1. So it would be wonderful to see a shakeup with a company like Critical Role showcasing a new product. However, it's important to keep things in perspective. Critical Role has, let's say, a few million viewers across their stream, podcast, and YouTube channel. Dungeons & Dragons has 20 million players according to data that Wizards of the Coast released in 2020. So while Critical Role is a pretty large fish, Dungeons & Dragons is a pretty big pond. All we can really do is wait and see whether Wizards of the Coast or Critical Role releases a statement about this OGL 1.1, but I feel pretty confident that Critical Role is going to come out of this fine. It's the smaller companies and the independent creators that concern me, so now more than ever is the time to get out there, try a new game, buy some third-party PDFs, and support independent artists. Share your favorite ones down in the comments below so we can all check them out. And if you need a little palate cleanser after all this doom and gloom, may I recommend this video where I talk about how Bell's Hells staged an